Oh, and then beat it on the very next try. It was a learning experience for all of us as to how difficult it is to actually get people to understand this kind of really abstract gameplay. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well, so I remember there was actually a lot of pushback in terms of how the hell we were going to do the UI for this sort of thing.
right.
And I remember that being a lot of back and forth, trying to figure out exactly how that was going to work and how we were supposed to convey it to the player. And it just seemed like there was a point in time where we were unsure if the rhythm game mechanic was even going to work.
Yeah, I think we were very close to having to pull back on it, but I think in the end it worked well enough, and we had enough help messages in there that people were able to understand what they had to do. My favorite thing about these, I actually wrote this flavor text up here. My favorite thing about this is how eloquent the Tyrannoids are. Like I wrote a number of these, and then Brad, who was the writer, rewrote them so that they didn't suck, But I really liked it. It was like, "Excuse me, sir, I wish to pass. Oh, you need to know the passcode, sir. You impugn my honor. I am not a Lombax." Like it was just it's just sort of silly madness, and I think that worked out pretty well. Another mandate with this was torturing the monkey. Which I think is...
That was actually a mandate.
Yes.
That was...
It was, like, spending time torturing Scrunch it was desirable, right? Like, everybody kind of likes it when, like, a cute little animal can be on fire. I don't know exactly why, but that was the...
I don't think everybody likes that.
That was the...
I think...
That was the premise, right? Is the more ways we can hurt or burn Scrunch, the better everything was going to be. This hallway, this hallway was a huge problem for us. So if you're looking straight down this hallway, you won't notice that to the right there's a corridor to go down. So almost every player would come straight up to this thing, get hit by it, and die. And I don't know why we didn't think of putting like a bolt trail going down here, but that probably would have solved it.
So, really quick, I just want to get back to the HUD for a moment. Was this the game where we convinced Ricardo that he destroyed PlayStation 2s?
No. That was the previous one. Because
Was
you
it?
guys were telling that legend by the time I started.
Okay.
Was it that? Oh,
Do you want to tell him?
yeah, I think you know the story a little bit better than I do because you were actually in the test
So
when it was happening.
Yeah, we went to we were running a user test, and we had 2 PlayStations just crash. And after they crashed, they had bricked. Like, they were completely useless. They didn't function as PlayStation 2s anymore. We had to send them back to Sony. And both times they crashed, the player who was playing was in the HUD. So I went up to Ricardo and jokingly said, "Hey, Ricardo, your HUD is bricking PlayStation 2s. Like, this isn't okay. You got to fix this." And he thought I was being serious. So he spent the rest of the day trying to figure out why his guys could be bricking PlayStation 2s. And he came up to me, and I spent the whole day watching the focus test, so I didn't know that he had gone through his entire day thinking this. And he came up to me and he said, "Mike, I've been looking all day, and I just can't figure out why this would be happening. This doesn't make any sense." And I was like, "Ricardo, nobody actually thinks that you did this. I was just joking." And he got so mad, and he was so deflated and sad, and it was at the same time very funny and very sad.
It does remind me of another hardware issue that we had during the development of this game. And this was a story that with Tony, it was really late at night, and we gotten these new controllers these like wireless controllers that we were really excited about. And we're like, "Oh, this is really cool." And Tony was just working on some stuff, and he had this really weird bug that whenever you fired the shock rifle, Ratchet would do a backflip. And we just spent ages and ages just like trying to debug, like trying to track the input, seeing like how are we getting these weird messages, so on and so forth. And I think it took Tony about 4 or 5 hours to realize that these controllers were just basically defective. And would just push random shit when you didn't press it at all, and so on and so forth. But I remember that being about 4 hours of Tony's night, just like, how can there be a bug that firing causes you to jump? It doesn't make any sense.
Tony, do you remember that?
I remember it vaguely. Just, we had a lot, like, I don't want to slag off third-party controllers, but third-party controllers are shit.
They're pretty shit.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so it was just some random manufacturer. I don't even remember who sent them to us. We just had them, and they had like these big battery packs and shit too, or something. Like they were crazy.
Oh god, this is fucking awful.
Like you suck at this really bad.
Yes. Now, Tony, I don't want to make you feel bad or anything, but you know, I did sort of sprain my thumb, and I have to play with my index finger. So
I see.
I'd like to see how well you could play, asshole, with a broken finger.
Well, if I only had the opportunity, I'm sure I could do incredibly well.
You'd probably do better than me. You are a pro at this, so.
This is a long level. We have a lot going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mention it when it happened, but all this section is in a separate game level. Like, we masked the transition, but there's so much content here, we actually had to break it off into 2 separate levels.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. The submarine transition is just basically a variation on the flying ship transitions.
Interesting.
So Al had to, somehow pack that into memory. Have we talked about Al?
I think we've only mentioned him in passing.
Let's talk about Al, because Al is kind of a force of nature when you work at Insomniac.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about Al though because there's very few. Like Al doesn't have a lot of weird personality quirks besides the one, which is being Al.
So Al is probably one of the top 5 engine programmers in the industry, as far as I'm concerned. Let's say, and I think it's because he can communicate telepathically with computers. Because one time, so I was doing some coding on this game, which most designers didn't do, right? And I ran into this problem that, I called Tony over and I'm like, Tony, this is crashing and I don't know why. And Tony said, oh, it's crashing because something's wrong with the engine. And so I called Al over and I went to go get a soda while Al was fixing the problem on my machine. And it maybe took me about a minute and a half to get the soda. And by the time I came back, there were 40 code files open on my computer. All of them were checked in, and Al was gone. And I booted it up, and it just worked. And what Al had done was he had just fixed the problem without even, compiling the code. He had just fixed it, checked it in. He knew it was all good, and, by somehow mind melding with the PS2. I don't know what he did.
Yeah, Al was definitely sort of a force of nature. The main thing he was always the solution to was memory problems. Whenever we were out of memory, it was you go crying to Al, and he would sit there, silently for, about a minute, and then he would say, okay. And then you just sort of know that it was going to be solved.
Yeah, it was never in question, really. It was like, okay, Al's on it, it's good.
Yeah. My favorite Al story is not even one that I experienced. It's only one that I've heard secondhand from Roberto. And he was talking about there was this meeting with Sony. And in the room, in the conference room at Insomniac, it was Ted, Al, Brian, and a bunch of Sony executives. And they were all just sitting there in the conference room in silence. And Roberto just walked by and sees all these people just sitting in the conference room not speaking to each other. And so he walks in and is just like, hey, what's up? And they're like, shh, Al's thinking. So they were all just sitting there waiting for Al to think through his problem and didn't want to disturb him. Just like 6 or 7 people just sitting there quietly. So and that's just sort of what it was working with him.
Oh, but look who's here.
That's right.
Yeah, we did miss the plumber in the last game, didn't we, Tony?
We did. We did not go and find the plumber.
You know what? I'm going to say if we can get to 300 subscribers, we'll go back and do that as a bonus episode. How's that sound? Tony?
I think we can do that.
Yeah?
Yeah,
All
I'm
right.
sorry.
I know you're eating your pizza, and you think
Yeah,
that's more important
That's exactly what was going on.
than what we're
I
doing
figured
here.
I could sneak a bike, but somebody had to talk to me.
You know what? Fuck you, Moo. I'm just gonna talk to you from now on because you're not just gonna
Awesome.
ignore me.
I have
Why
no
don't,
pizza.
why don't you talk about how terrible a segment this is, and whoever did this
Oh
needs
man.
to be ashamed.
So on the last game we had the crystal mining, right?
Right.
And so it was a relatively successful part of our metagame. Was you can go back, you can mine for crystals, you can gain experience. It's like a way of reusing content without having to force the player to replay the same thing over and over again, sort of. So on this game, we thought, let's do the same thing, but use fewer resources. So we're like, okay, we're going to make a bunch of twisty caverns, all alike, that the player can totally get lost in, and then fill it with a whole bunch of copies of the same enemy, and this will be fun, right? And then I was given the initial task of designing it, but after I very, very quickly realized that this was going to be a huge problem, passed it off to poor Paul. So Paul actually did all the design of these things. And I think he had to set up something like 100 or 200 enemy setups, none of which could be exactly the same. And the poor guy. I think by like his third week trying to set all this stuff up, you could watch him slowly going insane. But you know what? Now he's working at Blizzard, so he's probably happy.
Yeah, one of the things is about this that was so irritating was we had enemies on magnet boots in the last game. Like, that was something that we had already done. But in the last game, whenever you would hit them, they would just fall to their death. So we were able to cheat a lot of that kind of stuff, and there was no real combat on any magnet boot surfaces. But for this game, there's no place for them to fall to their death. So they have to do all their knockback reactions and all that sort of crap that you have to do when you hit an enemy with a weapon. And that is fucking horrifying, doing all that sort of stuff. There's so much work involved in all that. And it was just a nightmare to try to get everything working and to get all the bugs hammered out in these sections.
So
there were just so many.
Is it safe to say that our attempt to save artists' and programmers' work probably did not really save that much work in the end?
It might have saved some artist work. It certainly didn't save any programmer work, this section. Just because there was a lot going on, and there was a lot of really complicated problems in terms of what we were going to do here.
So I'm not going to do too much more of this. I'm going to... just get some sewer crystals so we can buy another weapon. But
Oh, wait, we don't even have to do this?
No, I don't think this is mandatory.
Then why are we here at all? Let's just get moving.
Okay, all right. I'll see if I can find out how to get back. So you know that swimming section, the force scroll swimming section we were in?
Yeah.
The reason it's there is because there's a one straightaway in this entire thing. And if you go down it, you can jump back into that current. And that was basically how we prevented people from getting lost. Is if you could find that one place, you could jump into the current and get back to the beginning of the level.
Gotcha.
So that was our shortcut.
Is that current any easier to find than the actual beginning of the level, though?
It is, yeah. I just am having trouble finding either of them right now. Especially once you get on the second floor of this building, you get the gravity boots and you run up and get up the second floor. Finding the current ends up being a little bit easier. There we go. All right, let's talk to Mr. Plumber. So, I remember originally it wasn't going to be crystals, but Brian Algeier really loves crystals for some reason. So it was already a sewer because we had the pipes. So Brian Algeier said, "Oh well, why don't they be sewer crystals?" And immediately everyone was like, "So it's poop, right?" and he's like, "No, it's not poop. It's sewer crystals." And there's a big thing. And then eventually, Brad, the writer, just wrote in the poop joke, and it got sealed forever. So
I think we're done with this level.
I
I think we're ready to move on.
I think finally, yeah, we're done with this level. So, do you want to sign off, Tony, since I seem to be incapable of doing so?
Yeah, so for Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal Developer Commentary, I am Tony Garcia.
And I'm Mike Stout, and our guest is...
Moo you.
And, Tony?
We will see you next time. Dude, there was a lot in that level.